All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome to Hour 2 of tonight's show here on the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. My guest this hour is Larry Lawson, and he is a former retired police officer who investigates the paranormal with his group in Florida. Joining me now from Vero Beach, Florida, is Larry Lawson. And Larry, great having you on the show tonight, buddy.
Oh, it's great to be back, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Larry, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what your groups do.
Okay, well, as you said, I'm a retired police officer. I spent about 40 years in the job doing various things, everything from patrol work, a lot of time in the investigative realm. Also as a criminal justice educator, I ran the police academy for this region of Florida for a number of years. And through all of that, I kind of experienced some things that couldn't be explained, as a lot of folks do in the law enforcement world. And that ended up being us creating the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, and by continuation, Indian River Hauntings, which is a group down here in Florida. And what we do is we investigate paranormal events, but we also spend time teaching folks about it and teaching folks the history of the area as well as the paranormal history of the area.
Larry, when did you have your first paranormal experience?
It was I just got into law enforcement. I was working in the Dade County Jail in Miami, Florida. Just a youngster. I was just barely 20, and was working in the jail. I was not a guest there. I was employed, and I was sitting in the control booth, and I clear as day saw a figure walk on the catwalk down one of the cell blocks. And I hollered at the guys that were working with me. That I thought the lieutenant had come upstairs to catch his horse around or whatever.
Right.
And I hollered at the guys that said, "Hey, lieutenant's on the catwalk." And they went out and checked and said, "There's nobody there." Now, this figure, Rob, was not see-through. It wasn't anything that drew my attention, anything other than it was a person. It was a solid figure, but there was nobody there. So that was my first real experience. Unlike a lot of people that have experiences when they were kids, mine was a 20-year-old rookie cop.
Did other members of the unit that you were working with also see unexplained phenomena that they were afraid to talk about?
Well, that's a really, really good question. I found that the guys they weren't afraid to talk about it in our closed little group there, but nobody would talk about it on the outside. In this particular case, when they got back to the control booth, they said, "Lawson, there's nobody out there." And I said, I'm telling you, I saw what I saw. And they looked at me, just shrugged their shoulders and said, "This place is haunted. Stuff like this happens all the time." And they proceeded to tell me about sheets that were folded in front of the suicide cell, the cell where we had people on suicide watch.
Right.
They talked about the coffee makers coming on their own, all kinds of strange things like that. So while I can't say that they would have gone to the shift commander and talked about it, it certainly was discussed in small groups. But back in those days, you got to understand, in our business, you started talking about stuff like this, your boss set you for a fit for duty exam, and that's the way it was back in those days. So you didn't really talk about it outside your own little circles.
How had it changed over the years, Larry, since you were that young 19-year-old sheriff's deputy in the Dade County Jail? Until present time, you just retired from a law enforcement agency where you were a detective. And was the feeling within the department the same as it was when you were just a rookie?
Absolutely not. It's really amazing how it evolved over the years. Like I said, back in those days, you just didn't talk about it except within your own small little groups, perhaps. But I think it really began to change when the TV shows started coming out. And a lot of people knock the TV shows, and some of it's for good reason, but it
Right.
did bring an awareness. Um, it did bring an awareness to the public that made it a little bit more mainstream. And then you began to see agencies, it began being talked about a whole lot more in agencies. In fact, it's gotten to the point where there's a one agency in particular in the Hawaiian Islands that did an entire um,
I'm sorry,
did
Larry.
a, no problem. Did an entire YouTube production of all the hauntings that went on in their precincts on on Oahu. It was Honolulu PD.
Hmm.
It was out there. So that shows you how much it has evolved. Now cops talk about it regularly amongst each other, and as you're aware, we're even creating an organization involving law enforcement officers that are also paranormal investigators on the side.
How has your experience as a seasoned law enforcement officer, as well as a seasoned detective, help you with your investigations into the paranormal?
The way we frame our investigations really in many ways mirrors how I would have conducted a homicide investigation. I'm certainly not suggesting these are homicide
Sure.
investigations, so don't misunderstand me, but the techniques are the same. In other words, everything is structured. You conduct your investigations a certain way. How how you talk to people, whether they're here or on the other side, it doesn't matter. How you talk to people, your ability to listen, your ability to discern um, what might be a bump caused by the air conditioner turning on or
Hmm.
something that you can't explain. So it broadens your mind and allows you to look at different pieces of evidence with a more of an open mind, yet skeptical mind. You never take the first answer that's given to you. In other words.
A lot of the groups that are out there, Larry, do not have any formal training when it comes to
Nope.
proper investigative techniques, proper ways of collecting evidence, maintaining evidence, securing
Mhm.
evidence. How, what kind of effect does this have on the paranormal or, ghost research societies that are out there?
Well, it's a free for all, to be honest
Mm,
with you. And that's not to say there aren't a lot of good teams out there and a lot of folks with um, the right motives in mind. But if they don't have training on how to conduct an investigation, how to set
right.
it up, how to do the paperwork, how to collect the evidence, preserve the evidence, then it just becomes a lot of times folks having fun, and I'm certainly not going to kick that, but
Sure.
it doesn't allow for a standardized collection of evidence that allows you to come to a conclusion. And go ahead.
I was just going to ask you if in your opinion that most of these groups are just hobbyists and they're out there for the thrill as well as to, well, let's see if there really are ghosts out there. And if there are, okay, super. If they're not, we'll try again next weekend.
Well, you get a little bit of both, Rob. There's a faction of our field that I refer to as paranormal thrill seekers.
Hmm.
And while that term up front sounds kind of derogatory, it's not meant to be. There are people that enjoy doing things for a thrill. I mean, why would somebody jump out of a perfectly good airplane, for example?
Exactly.
They do it for the thrill. So there are folks out there that certainly want the thrill, the excitement of experiencing something unknown, a voice from the other side, perhaps something moving, or maybe even a full-bodied apparition uh, popping up in front of them.
Hmm.
And that's the excitement and that's the thrill. But not a lot of organizations look at that in a sterile sense. Okay, this is the evidence put before me. How did it happen? how did it occur, what are the factors around it, and putting all of this together to come to a conclusion of what this really is. So yes, there are a lot of folks out there that are doing it for the fun of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have absolutely no problem with that as long as they understand that's what they're doing. But there are more and more groups that are starting to take things a lot more seriously, and they're trying to expand the scientific direction that the field's going.
And are they succeeding?
Hmm. Working on it, it's a tough game, Rob, because you don't. First of all, we really don't know what the phenomenon is,
Right.
and anybody that says they do are either fooling themselves or fooling you, or a little
Hmm.
bit of both, because we don't know. You can't you can't say nothing's out there because people for millenniums, all social classes, all cultures have been experiencing something. So something is going on. It's what that something is that we have to try to find out. And that's why we have to look at these events with a sterile investigative eye to try to find the answers. If that's the direction you want to go. If you just want to go out and get the bejeebers scared out of you,
Hmm.
great.
Why is it that some people can have these experiences and other people standing right beside them don't experience the same encounter as the person beside them does? For example, you get 10, 15 people go into a haunted house.
Hmm.
Even if 10 have what they claim to be a paranormal experience, you've still got 5 people who say, geez, we saw nothing.
Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah, but what determines that, Larry? What determines who has the experience and who doesn't?
Rob, if we had that answer, that would be the beginning of solving this whole thing. I don't know. There are theories out there, and I caution they are strictly theories because we don't know yet. Um, I had an incident one time, to give you an example, and I personally saw this. We were doing a historical tour in a town called Fellsmere. You're
Hmm.
familiar with it.
Yes, beautiful
And
little town.
yes, it is. My son Ryan, very, very skeptical, very, very straightforward, no nonsense kind of kid. Um, he was taking a group into what was the old bank there, and there was some activity going there, and they took 2 cell phones, and on the both cell phones, one was a Samsung, one was an Apple,
Right.
and the question was asked, and you heard it on both the recorders on these phones: is there anybody here? On one of the phones, clear as a bell, you got a voice that came back. You didn't even need earphones for it, but of course. But the other phone didn't get a thing.
Mm. That is
How does
strange.
that occur? And I personally witnessed this. Now, the theories here would be frequency and vibration. I'm sure are aware, we are all creatures that have different frequencies and vibrations as part of our being. And could that be part of it? Could it be uh, the way the calibration of the phones,
Hmm.
those frequencies didn't match? Now, the 2 things could have happened there, Rob. Only 2 things. A, it was faked, or B, one voice was there on one phone and one wasn't for some unknown reason. I can tell you, you know me, it wasn't faked. It
All
just
right,
happened
Larry,
right
I
in front of everybody.
hate to do this, old friend, but you and I have to take a commercial break. An explanation,
Not a
my guest
problem.
this hour is my good friend, Larry Lawson, and he is in Vero Beach, California. He is a paranormal researcher, investigator, and, in my opinion, a very knowledgeable historian. And if you'd like to find out more about Larry, visit IndianRiverHauntings.com. The X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and Larry Lawson will return right here on Classic 1220 after these short messages. Don't go away.
Did. No one had the right to say what he said about you. And it's so cold and lonely.
I'm Rob McConnell, and welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Today on the X Zone, Bessie, the lake monster of Lake Erie. From the time the ice starts to break and flow on Lake Erie, monster trackers start their never-ending quest to prove the existence of Lake Erie's monster, Bessie. When it comes to looking for Bessie, internet provider and developer Dirk Vanderploeg of Hamilton, Ontario starts his electronic and physical search from his Lake Erie cottage. Using a television camera that is equipped with night vision technology connected to a computer, Vanderploeg and his group of dedicated monster trackers around the world spend countless hours watching computer screens in the hope to get a glimpse of the elusive Bessie at www.monstertracker.com. Spring through fall, Vanderploeg and people along Lake Erie shoreline continue their search for proof that the elusive and legendary Bessie does in fact exist.
All around old Cape Horn, ships of the line, ships of the morn. Some who wish they'd never been born, they are the ghosts of Cape Horn. Fallerella, riddle-de-rum, with a rim-dim-diddy and a rum-dum-dum. Sailing away at the break of dawn, they are the ghosts of Cape Horn.
And welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. My guest this hour is Larry Lawson, and he is with Indian River Hauntings. His website is www.indianriverhauntings.com. And you're listening to us right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streaming around the world and into the great beyond on classic1220.ca. Larry, we were talking about how come some people encounter the paranormal in a group and others don't. And you used the cell phone example of, how things work on one. You had an Apple phone, you had an Android, and one picked up an EVP and the other didn't.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a logical explanation.
Oh, I agree. But what is it? And that's what we don't know. Now, you were talking about how one person can experience it and the next to him doesn't.
Yeah.
That frequency vibration thing could also come into play, but there's also the possibility of mass hysteria. There could be people's imagination running wild. There are incidents where I've seen folks that are believed to have psychic abilities say, "Oh, I see something in the corner." Well, next thing you know, everybody's seeing it. So there's a lot of things that come into play here, and we have yet to figure out a foolproof way to avoid folks getting caught up in that end of it.
Larry, when you and your team go out to do an investigation, how do you do it? How do you proceed from the time that you get the call from a concerned person that they really believe that their house is haunted to the time when you and your team say, "All right, that's it. The investigation is finished. Let's go on to the next one."
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
Okay. Oh, great question. And starters, a lot of times we don't do a lot of homes for a lot of different reasons. We do a lot of commercial buildings. We do a lot of businesses, but we will do homes if there's a problem. So wanted to make that clear up front. We start off by I have one member of my team make contact with the person in charge of the venue, and they go over a questionnaire with them. That includes things like, is there anybody there that has had mental health issues? Anybody there that's ill? Is there anybody that's been abusing narcotics? We have to ask those very sensitive questions because it helps us begin to paint a picture of what's going on there. We get to the scene. I don't want to bore you with all the little details, but we basically get there. I have a person designated as my lead investigator, a guy named Mike Maxwell, retired firefighter. He puts the teams together based upon how many investigators can show up at that particular venue, how big it is, so on and so forth. And then we proceed to go through rotations. One group would go in one area, another group would go in the other area. At a certain time, they'll switch positions. During those periods of times, they share information with me at the command center that I type into the computer. If they have evidentiary stuff such as EVPs or photographs, it gets downloaded into the computer that later gets put into another hard drive and locked away. Once we've finished for that particular evening, a decision's got to be made where we're coming back. Look at this kind of like a crime scene. You don't always get everything the first time you walk through it.
True.
So we tend to like if everything is seeming okay, and we've gotten at least a little bit of information, we'll many times want to come back 2, maybe even 3 times just to see if there's something there. And let's say we got something really interesting the first time, let's make sure it's real. We'll go back and we'll try to recreate it the next time and see if it can be recreated. Therefore, it isn't necessarily anything paranormal. Or maybe we'll get a repeat. So we'll tend to go back to spots. So we just don't go one spot usually and then don't go back unless there's a reason for it.
What has been your most haunting investigation that you've done?
Haunting, that's a great way to put it, because haunting does not necessarily mean scary.
Right.
We got called into a place, little shop. It was a mystic shop, and we got called there. My daughter happened to be a cop in the town where that was going on, and she answered a burglar alarm call there in the middle of the night. And one thing led to another. Something happened while she was there, and she said, "You need to talk to my dad." So those folks called us in, and we ended up doing 3 investigations there. Oh, but to make a long story short, the investigators started off, and it was quiet. And then suddenly we started getting information from different sources, and we'll set up different pieces of equipment to kind of triangulate or corroborate each other. For example, dowsing rods, a spirit box, maybe a REM pod, or some different pieces of equipment in there. We film everything, I might add. Everything is videotaped, so everything can be seen and looked at with a discerning eye later. So we're going through this, and to make a really, really long story short, we started getting some information that was really pertinent. And we even had, and this was, I've never been, we had a medium that was there also, and this is done in a very scientific, sterile way, so that it doesn't affect anything else. And I had earphones on, listening to what the medium was saying. It was confirming what the other pieces of equipment were saying. We got a name, we got an age. Because of my background in crimes against children, it was a child we were talking to. I started asking questions, and I was able to determine that what this child was saying was, she's a 5-year-old kid that died in possibly 1939. Very interesting. So I get my daughter to go check, and they can't find records anywhere, because records back in those days was probably just a suggestion. And she went and talked to the superintendent of the local cemetery in the town, and he ends up calling me a day or 2 later. And once again, to make a long story short, he had some folks come down from the Northeast who were looking at another grave site. This is before he even talked to my daughter, and he got talking to them about children that were buried there. And the guy says to the superintendent, "Yeah, we had some sure-tailed, or distant relatives that lived here also, and they had a little girl. Her name was Belinda, which is the name we got. She was 5 years old, which is the age we got, and she died under tragic circumstances in 1939. And
Wow.
Rob, they took us to the grave.
Unreal.
Now, it is unreal, and we're working that right now, trying to put those pieces together from criminy, a half a century ago, more than a half a century ago. May never get anywhere. We're working hard on it, but what I'm getting at is there's no way those two things could have been connected with each other, and that's the sort of thing that keeps me going. So when you say haunting, that's it. Because is there an unsolved homicide out here?
Yeah, that's right.
So haunting. That when you say haunting, that's what comes to my mind.
What do you think the connection with ghosts and spirits that you and other paranormal investigators encounter during the course of a case that you're working on, and the afterlife? How does this connect?
Wow, once again, if you had the answer to that question, we wouldn't be doing this. But there's 3 things that we look at, with 3 theories. One is the theory that these are spirits that have somehow gone to the other side and are reaching back. How that's occurring, we're still working on it. This next, Einstein talks about, I think, 11 different dimensions. do these dimensions blend?
Mm-hmm.
And with that, you've got things like the stacked, um, my just want to write out right, the stacked theory, stacked dimension theory, where they're all stacked up, and sometimes these dimensions cross. And Rob, could it be us?
Could be.
Could a lot of this just be the creation of our own minds? People say, we only use 20% of our brain. The truth is we use 100% of it, but we only know what 20% of it does. So is it us that's creating it? So how do we connect all of them? Not sure yet, because it could be a combination of several things. Let's say Einstein was right and there are dimensions out there.
Mm-hmm.
Would that answer what the Catholic faith calls purgatory? It's another dimension. And I'm not sure how I feel about all that yet, but it's a theory and you got to keep your mind open to it. And I don't know if I'm really answering your question correctly, but we don't know what the connection is yet. You'll talk to some folks, they'll talk about, you go to the other side and it's a hive mind almost.
Mm-hmm.
Everything goes in one spot. And when it's your time to come out, you come back to Earth.
What part of the investigation do you have problems with the different religious philosophies and how they see the paranormal? Or is that something that you and your team really don't focus on?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you?
All right, I'll rephrase it.
Okay.
That's my rephrasing question bumper. Is you were talking about Catholicism a few moments ago,
Mm-hmm.
and the Bible is filled with paranormal events from start to finish.
Absolutely.
How does one's religious belief, work with one's quest to investigate and to solve the mysteries of the paranormal? Is there a conflict there?
That's a great question, and I've wrestled with that because I'm of the Christian faith,
Mm-hmm.
and I have no doubt that God and Jesus exists, in my opinion.
Right.
So how does this all connect? And it says the Bible says you're not supposed to mess with this stuff. Okay. Um, but an interesting thing, my father-in-law, God rest his soul, was a Catholic deacon, very, very religious, pious man. And I would tell him about what we were doing. He found it fascinating. And he said, Larry, there's nothing wrong with what you're doing as long as you are doing it for knowledge and not for personal gain. And he said, we pray to spirits all the time. So
That's right.
definitely they're out there. So that's how he took it. And I guess the best way for me to answer your question is I have personally found very few people that are offended by this, even if they're Baptist, Catholic, or regardless of what religious their belief. I guess because the tact we're taking on finding out the answers.
Larry,
Now,
stand by,
if it,
buddy. We've got to take our break.
oh wow,
Yeah,
okay,
13, 14 minutes goes by really
yeah,
fast when
so
we're deeply involved in a topic such as we're talking about tonight. Exonation, Larry Lawson is our guest. His website is IndianRiverHauntings.com. And you can listen to Larry's radio show, Paranormal Stakeout, by going to paranormalstakeout.org. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on Classic 1220 and around the world on classic1220.ca. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Repair, demons dance everywhere, southern gales, tattered sails, and none to tell the tale. Come on.
I love the colorful clothes you wear and the way the sunlight plays upon her hair. I hear the sound of a gentle word on the wind that lifts her perfume through the air. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the excitations.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and you're listening to us on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streaming around the world on classic1220.ca. Larry Lawson is my special guest. He's a personal friend of mine, Explanation. I've had the pleasure of knowing this gentleman for, nearly 10 years now, Larry.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And if you'd like to find out more about Larry and the great work that he does, and if you're ever in the Indian River area of Florida, you have to get a hold of Larry and go on one of his tours. They are phenomenal. The best part of going on any of Larry's tours, they're entertaining, they're informative, they're educational, and you also get a historical perspective of the areas that you go into. So his website is IndianRiverHauntings.com. And if you'd like to listen to Larry's radio show, Paranormal Stakeout, go to www.paranormalstakeout.org. Larry, before we went to the break, we were talking about how one's religious beliefs may or may not interfere with their paranormal investigative side. And you were telling us that your father-in-law was a deacon, and he gave you some pretty sound advice. But what other advice, or how have you found the religious aspect of your investigations team as it reflects to the paranormal investigation? Since the Bible basically says, the paranormal is taboo.
Well, and now we can get into a little bit of philosophy here, and there are people out there that feel so strongly about that they feel that any inquiry into the other side is just wrong. I don't look at it that way, and this is just typical of human beings. We all have different views of things, and the way I feel about it, and I'm not Catholic, but my father-in-law and I had some really deep discussions on this. And it's what the motivation is. And while the Bible is the Word of God, it was also written by man for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I think we need to keep that in mind, because man, I've never known man to be perfect. So when they write things, it may come out a little bit skewed. That being said, I look at it as I am not trying to tap into the other side to get an unfair advantage in life. I'm doing what God gave me, and that's doing an inquiry, trying to figure things out. God gave me a gift to be a detective, and that's really what I'm doing here. Now, that may be a justification on my side. I fully admit that, but that's how I see it. I'm trying to find out what this phenomenon is, and not 100% sure what it is. Is it us? Is it the scientific theory of dimensions? Is there something on the other side that's allowing folks to reach out to us just to send us messages? We don't know what it is yet. So I think that inquiry is legitimate. Go ahead.
Why is it called the other side?
Oh, I don't know.
Because isn't it possible, if we're talking about Einstein and the theories of stacked dimensions or stacked universes, that there is no other side? They're existing with us on this very same level of reality, except a different dimension.
Yep. I think we've always taken this. Let's go back to the movies. It's just there's always been the veil on the other side. What's on the other side of life? I think it's just how we viewed it. I would tend to agree with what you're saying. Is there really any evidence that we aren't all existing in the same plane?
Right.
To go off on another little quick tangent, I think this is one of my biggest frustrations about equipment in the paranormal field. And I am not smart enough to figure it out. I'm putting that on the table right now. But there are so many intelligent folks out there that have this kind of talent. Why haven't we been able to come up with equipment that would be able to begin to separate that?
Well, I think I've got a bit of an answer there. And it's just like Seth Shostak and SETI. They are using technology that is known to us, and I believe they're trying to find an existence of extraterrestrials who are on a totally different wavelength, and that's why the investigative techniques that SETI uses, as well as other astronomers, radio telescopes, and so on, are not finding what they're looking for, because we are looking for and have everything calibrated for carbon-based living units. But what does it say that? Where does it say that people out there have to be carbon-based? Maybe they're silicone-based. So no matter what we're trying to use to communicate, isn't working. Is that possible that that is the same scenario when investigating the paranormal?
Absolutely. And I think you actually hit something right on the head there. We constantly talk about how can somebody travel here from another galaxy? I
Hmm.
mean, they couldn't do it. We're looking at it through physics as we see it today.
Exactly.
And let's face it, 150 years ago, if anybody said that we'd be flying in space other than Jules Verne, they would have said you're crazy. Why?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have that knowledge then. So it could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we might have that equipment. But what we have to do is we have to keep working towards it. It's not going to be handed to us. We've got to keep experimenting. We got to keep trying out different techniques until something begins to click. And one of these individuals, electrical engineers or engineers of some sort, may be able to eventually put a piece of equipment together using new technology that today we don't have. So I think
Yeah.
you've hit something right on the head there. I totally agree with you.
I often wonder, Larry, what would happen if tomorrow some geniuses at MIT or some other great hall of education come out and prove that Einstein was wrong? How would that affect science and how we look at the paranormal?
Wow. Well, for starters, and this is where, and you get folks on both sides of the fence. There are
Hmm.
some folks that no matter what you tell them, they're not going to believe it. And there are some folks that say that no matter what you prove to them, they're going to still say they're right and it exists. The answer's somewhere kind of in the middle. How I look at it and how my team looks at it is we're going to where the evidence takes us.
Right.
And that's what a good investigator does. They take the evidence, they examine it, and they go in the direction of what that evidence says to prove their case. Um, and that's where serious researchers have to be. If you're so convinced that it exists, that proof is put before you that it doesn't, and you can't see it, well, then are you really truly objectively investigating the case?
Of course not. That would just be like you or I when we were in the police force, starting an
Hmm.
investigation and already in our minds putting the handcuffs on a suspect.
Can I share a story with you real quick that
Please,
puts this
yeah,
in perspective?
sure.
All right. Most of my work as an investigator was crimes against children. I ran a unit that was doing that, and I had a case one time where I got called to the hospital. I was the sergeant in charge of the unit, but I took a lot of the calls myself. And I went to the hospital and I saw this just darling little girl. She's maybe 4 or 5 years old. The biggest, blackest eyes you've ever seen in your
Oh,
life.
wow.
And I was sick. And in my mind, I remember here, I said, somebody's going to jail for this. But then I investigated it. I backed off and I investigated it. I looked at the evidence and it was an accident. And what happened was the child bumped her head and through playing.
Okay.
And the blood drained down into her eyes and it
Hmm.
made it look like somebody punched her lights out. That incident right there, Rob, woke me up. It was, oh God, it was 30 some odd years ago now, but it woke me up and I realized I can't jump to conclusions. I got to look at all the evidence,
Yeah.
and based upon that evidence, I make my decision. So,
Speaking about evidence, old friend, in your
mhm.
opinion, as a former police detective, and now after 22 years of investigating the paranormal, do you believe that there is enough evidence that if you were to take the evidence at hand, go into a court of law, proceed as if it was a criminal case, that there would be enough evidence to give the preponderance of evidence to you that the court would say, definitely, there is proof of the paranormal. The paranormal does exist based on the evidence presented to the court this day.
No, no. And the reason being is so much of the evidence,
Hmm.
while compelling, the way it was collected, the way it was observed, the circumstances by which it was seen or observed, would allow, at least in this country, I can't speak for Canada, would allow a good defense attorney to say, but what about this and what about that? Because, and I'm thinking about it in my system here, all the defense has to do is put doubt in the mind.
That's right.
And we have not yet reached a point where we can prove it to that level in a court of law. And that, it's amazing you said that, because that's my kind of my mantra. I want to bring evidence to be able to prove to a jury of my peers that the paranormal exists. Do I believe it? Well, sure. I believe that there's something out there. I believe that there's something we can't explain.
Mm-hmm.
But we are not there yet where we can say, put a stamp on it, say it without a doubt it exists. And another thing I like to say, until Abraham Lincoln pulls up a chair, sits down right next to me and say, Larry, this is what's going on the other side, and here's all the proof. Until something like that happens, and I'm being facetious, of course, it's going to be almost impossible to do it. Now, I've seen things, Rob, I cannot explain. I have seen things, you and I have talked about this, the case I told you about a little while ago.
Yeah.
I can't explain how this is happening. I can't explain how people for generations have had things happening from every culture, every socioeconomic level. Something is happening. Our job is to find out what that is.
I am so happy to see you and other members of law enforcement, like our good friend Elliot Van Dusen, who is a former RCMP officer in Nova Scotia. The dedication and professionalism that you and Elliot and other members of law enforcement, past and present, are bringing to the field of the paranormal, because it shows that it's getting some very serious attention, and that the procedures and policies that are in place by people like yourself and Elliot are professional, and you're following the methodology of an excellent criminal investigator. And sometimes I've heard it say that people take their investigations too serious. Well, I say they have to be taken serious, because in order to find what the issue is and what the quote-unquote crime is, and that being the paranormal event, it has to be taken seriously and done in a very methodical and professional manner.
Well, thank you for that, and I agree with you. Let's put this in even deeper perspective. We do residences on occasion, but that's what a lot of teams do all the time, are residences. And people call them in because of issues, because of problems. If that team doesn't go in there and conduct themselves in such a way that they can give these folks at least somewhat of an answer of what's going on, give them logical reasons why something may be or may not be occurring, and they just go in there and they hear the first bump on the wall and say, oh, yep, it's definitely your Uncle Billy or whatever, you could be harming the people that live there.
All right, let's stand by. I've got to take my final break, Larry. Exonation
All right.
Larry Lawson is my very special guest. He's a personal friend of mine. I've known this guy for over 10 years now. And I just love the way that he and his organization investigate, and the procedures that they take, and how they're bringing professionalism into the paranormal investigation scenario. And we'll talk more to Larry on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues right here on Classic 1220. Don't go away.
Oh, she must be kind. There is freedom within, there is freedom without. Try to catch the deluge in a paper cup. There's a battle ahead, many battles are lost, but you'll never see the end of the road while you're traveling with me. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now, hey.
Welcome back, everyone. The X Zone is heard Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until midnight right here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. Larry Lawson is my special guest. He is the gentleman responsible and in charge of Indian River Hauntings and the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation. The website is indianriverhauntings.com. First of all, Larry, thanks very much for coming on the show tonight, and congratulations on your show, Paranormal Stakeout.
Thank
And,
you.
something really new. Your book, Haunted Indian
Ah,
River County, that's published by Acadia Publishing, is going to be released in March of 2024.
yeah, very excited about that.
Wow.
And once again, if talking about the history, I love talking to people about the history, especially of our area.
Mhm.
So the book has a lot of history in it, as well as the hauntings that surround our area. So I'm hoping folks enjoy it.
Doing this show for the 30 plus years that I have, Larry, one thing I've learned that if you have an investigation team that does not know history within the area that they practice or that they like to say is the area of their expertise, they know nothing.
History, history is everything when it comes to this. To be a good paranormal investigator, you must embrace and love history because that's the only way it works. If you're just going in for the bump of the night,
Hmm.
y- okay, you're having fun, but you're not getting anywhere. History is everything.
What are some of the paranormal events that you cover in the book, in Haunted Indian River County?
Oh, well, a lot of them are experiences my team has come up with. I mean, we've
Hmm.
had some really interesting ones. Uh, Probably one story. This is not even an investigation we did, but it's this happened around the turn of the 20th century, back about 1895. There was this gentleman who actually started the town of Sebastian, but it was called New Haven. He was a pastor from up north, and a bunch of kids one day after he was tossed out of office for he was the town postmaster. Some kids who were clamming in the water saw him on the beach digging, and everybody thought he had a bunch of treasure from the treasure ships that had sunk along the coast. And they went home, told his parents. No, it couldn't have been kids. Oh no, we just saw him out there. No, it couldn't have been. Well, he had died the day before.
Oh,
So what the
Lord.
kids saw, that's an interesting story. Um, Certainly the Driftwood Resort where Waldo Sexton was the guy that really put the town together. He still hangs around there, and he crops up every once in a while. So we talk about him. We talk about Fellsmere, my beautiful Fellsmere,
Yeah.
and all the things that go on inside of the school. And if anybody's interested on my website, we've even got this on here under the evidence section. One of my team members up there one day was saying this little boy that we identify as Billy, and with just the name we gave him. And on his recorder one night, we're doing a thing, and he says, "Billy, is this the room you like to be in?" The clear as a bell, Rob, on the recorder, you get a little boy saying, "Yes, sir." Now there were no kids in that building. It was in the evening on the weekend. There were no kids in that building. It was just us. So those are the sort of things that we talk about, and we try to put an explanation twist to it if it's there. But it's just so many interesting things happen throughout Indian River County, and I would lay odds most communities have interesting incidents. But I just happen to love Indian River.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Indian River, Saint Sebastian, and that area is called the Treasure Coast.
Yes. Yes, That's after along our coast here. We have a large reef that has sunk ships for the last several hundred years. But in 1715, a Spanish fleet of 12 ships went down off our coast and strew so much, and they'd been pillaging Central and South America, and they strewed. There's so much treasure out there that they still have not recovered all of it, even today, even with Mel Fisher out there looking. Um, and that's how we got the name Treasure Coast, because after a hurricane here,
Hmm.
somebody's finding something of interest out there. So we're just rife with history here. See, people look at Florida as, excuse me, sun, citrus fruit, beaches, Disney World, but the history here is so magnificent and such an integral part of what was happening to our nation in those early years. Just fascinating stuff.
Tell us about some of the tours that you yourself lead as a tour guide. Where do you take
Okay.
where do you take them, and what is the feedback you get from the guests who join you for these paranormal haunts?
Well, you first have to the general tours that I do are simply historical ghost tours, and what that means is I give you a history of the area. I tell you how the area developed,
Mm-hmm.
who were the folks that were involved in it. Um, then I walk them around, and I only do tours in places that we have investigated. So I will share things that we have found. And I try to be very, very careful to tell folks that I am not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just laying out the facts for you, and you can take it how you so desire. But we talk about some of the events that we've had, and there are plenty of legends around here. Also, we do it on the beach in Vero, do it in Sebastian, and we also are out in Fellsmere on occasion. Now, we also do other events where I try to teach folks what this paranormal research thing is and what it's not. And we do several of those events where we just present evidence and we present people with information that they can make intelligent decisions. We do not want to hype things. And sometimes folks actually have some pretty fascinating things happen to them. And sometimes nothing happens. And the way I explain it is we don't control it. It either happens or it doesn't. But most importantly, the feedback I get is thank you for the history.
Yeah.
I did, the biggest pleasure I get is when I've got somebody that lives in Vero Beach, have lived there their whole lives, and we finished the tour and they said, I didn't know that. To
That's a
me,
great
that's
feeling.
success.
How do you deal with skepticism, Larry?
Mm. Well, I was a cop. I lived in a world of skepticism.
I
Uh,
understand
so,
that, brother. But I mean, here,
um,
being a cop is you deal in facts all the time.
mhm, absolutely.
But here in the paranormal,
Yep.
we don't have the facts to substantiate calling it real yet because we can't take it in court. And I use that as an example. So I I I, I want to know how Larry, the person who is in charge of Indian River hauntings as well as the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, deals with skeptics.
Essentially, hey, you have the right to look at things and feel about this the way you want. I'm not trying to convince you of anything. What I am trying to have you do is keep an open mind. Now, I've had people look at me and say, "You're a cop. How can you believe this stuff? You deal in tangible evidence." And how I respond to that is, well, if I came to your house to investigate a crime,
Yeah.
would you A, rather me just come in and say, I think this is what happened because that's just what I think? Or would you want me to examine all of the evidence, carefully go through it, and determine what was the crime and who committed it based upon the evidence after open-minded investigation and examination of evidence? And they said, well, obviously that we want you to do that. I said, I would say paranormal investigation is the same. Now, if I was to sit here and tell everybody this exists because I said so because I've experienced it, can't prove half of it. But what I can say is too many people over time have experienced too many things to say that it's just everybody's imagination. There's got to be something to it. So keep an open mind, take the facts as you get them, and then make your decision. Come to your conclusion.
You know, Larry, when you were saying that you tell people, you have the right to believe, I could just see you saying you've got the right to believe as you're throwing them over the front of your car and slapping handcuffs on them.
No, that's good though. No, I've one thing I've learned from being a cop. It, every time when I was on the job, every time I thought I'd seen the lowest level of human depravity, for example,
Hmm.
somebody else would show me that there's a new level.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And and what ends up happening is I think I've learned to have an open mind. I'm not going to shoot anything down unless I have the proof to shoot it down. Just like I'm not going to say anything is happening unless I have the proof. And that's what's so very, very important. You've got to have an open mind. If I shut my mind down and say, all mediums, for example, are frauds.
Hmm.
then I'm not allowing myself the ability to look at any other possibilities. And Rob, I think you even talked about it earlier. There is so much of our science. We could be looking for trying to solve the UFO question with tactics and science that only we know about,
That's right.
not even understanding what. So what's the difference between that and ghosts, if you will? We don't know all the answers yet. So to close your mind off, and I'm just talking to somebody who's a skeptic,
Right.
if they were talking to me, if you close your mind off, then you don't have the ability to see other possibilities.
Larry, I've got about 2 minutes left. Something I wanted to get your feedback on is why don't paranormal groups want to share their findings with other paranormal groups? I know
I, I
as an ex-cop, and I know you know this, that we depended on
mhm.
working with other agencies, and we were very open to sharing data. And yet, to try and solve the mystery of the paranormal, nobody wants to share information except you guys.
Well, I think it's changing in a sense when you talk about groups that like ours or Elliot has up in Nova Scotia and a bunch of others. Ike Enzi out there in New Mexico
Hmm.
will do that because we understand the importance of it. I think there's a lot of people that have personal motives involved in keeping it to themselves, and quite frankly, I think most teams don't even look at this as a true research of collection of evidence and examining it and trying to find the answers. And it's not a knock on them. It's just not where their head's at because maybe they don't think like a
Yeah.
cop does. I don't know. But I think it's people and people are selfish and people want to keep it all to themselves sometimes. And we got to get away from that if we're ever going to make headway.
Larry, the time has come, my friend, when I must say so long for tonight. But before I go, let our listeners know how they can find out about you and your websites and so on. You've got about 20 seconds.
And you can get a hold of us and check both the Paranormal FBI with Florida Bureau of Paranormal and Indian River Hauntings at IndianRiverHauntings.com. Check us out on YouTube at Indian River Hauntings 2341 and catch us on Facebook on both the FBPI as well as Indian River Hauntings.
And don't forget his radio show, Paranormal Stakeout, at
Oh, Paranormal Stakeout.
www.paranormalstakeout.org. Larry Lawson, take care of yourself, my friend, and, you know, say hi to the family and all the great people of Fellsmere and Vero Beach for me.
And we'll do that. Thanks for having me on, Rob.
Take care, buddy. That's it for tonight, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. We're heard Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until midnight, right here on Classic 1220 and streamed around the world at classic1220.ca. So until tomorrow night, just remember my thoughts, my wishes are with you all, and keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.